You know, the holiday Labor Day is a totally secular holiday. It is nowhere found in the Bible. It's not a biblical holiday that's a crossover like we see Christmas or Easter is a religious holiday, but a secular society celebrates that too. This is a totally non-religious holiday, Labor Day. But I am so very thankful for this holiday. It gives me the opportunity to stand before you today and just recognize how nice it is for people to have worked in our lives. When you came in today, a lot of you received a piece of paper here, and you had the time and filled it out and passed it in. And I just want to read some of those. I know I can't get to all of them, but I just want to read a few of them, different things that you've worked at, jobs you've had. One is library and worked at McDonald's. How many of you ever worked at McDonald's growing up? Okay, got a couple of McDonald's workers there. Public school teacher for 30 years and is retired from that. How many of you are a school teacher or retired school teacher? Yeah, we've been blessed by that. Tobacco, worked in tobacco. How many people worked in tobacco? There you go. All right. So, and that puts you in the careers you're in today because you had to work in tobacco there. Worked at Weyerhaeuser. How many people worked at Weyerhaeuser growing up? Another great one. Worked in a grocery store. How many worked? Yeah, that was my first job, was working in a grocery store. I love this when they said one job, farmer. Okay, how many farmers that we got there? Yeah, that we've done those things. Timber cruiser and logger. How many of you worked in logging before? And so there you go. Secretary. How many have worked in a secretary position? Raise your hand. There you go. Cleaning, facilities cleaning and housekeeping and stuff. How many have done that? Yeah, that's what my mom was in, all those things. Bank teller. Yeah, be a bank tellers. How about police officer? I liked it was on the same sheet, bank teller and police officer, so I kind of like that. Brick mason, we did that. Retired from Martin County School, truck drivers. Clerks, worked in a store like Belk Tyler's. How many of you worked in a retail situation like that? Yeah, a lot of us. Physical therapy. How about that? Nurse. All right. It's, like I say, I wish we could just go through and read all of these, and I knew the time wouldn't allow that. And I may not have called out some of the jobs that you've had, but it was two reasons. One, I wanted to see that, and the other was I wanted you to be reminded. All of us to be reminded of the jobs that we have had and the jobs that people around us have done and how it has molded our lives, how it has made life so much better and made so many things possible because people showed up to work. Not every job, and as on that list, not every job was glamorous. Your job that you have right now may not be very glamorous. I'm always reminded of my grandpa Mills that worked in the coal mines of West Virginia. But my mom told me he hated the coal mines, hated them, and would work and then would try something else, but it was only one thing in West Virginia that you could make enough money to feed your family, and he would go right back into those mines. I'm not thankful that he had to work a job that he was not happy and fulfilled in, but I'm very thankful that he worked and raised his family, fed them. My aunts and uncles taught them, and every one of us, I thought back over this week, had a strong work ethic, including my mom, that he did those things. So on this Labor Day, I think it's great just to say thank you. No matter what jobs you've done, and we're going to talk about this some, no matter what, thank you for what you've done. Let's pray together. God, I come to you and just want to say on behalf of a church, as a half of a citizen of this country, everything, a community. We're so thankful for the abilities that we had to work, the opportunities that we've had to raise our families and to pave the way and pay the way, to make things better here, to make things better around the world. I thank you for those who have worked. I thank you for those who have retired. I thank you for those who had a heart to work, but for some reason or another, health or whatever, cannot work. But I pray you bless all of those categories. And we just thank you and praise you for what opportunities we've had. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Wouldn't you say an amen to that? There are two books in the Old Testament called 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Now, a chronicle, by definition, is a factual, written account of historical events in a chronological order, or an order of which they occurred. So if you read 1st and 2nd Chronicles, one writer said you get a picture from Adam to Israel. And so it kind of get a picture of all of that in one place. One of those places, one of those books in 2nd Chronicles, and that's where we're going to spend all of our time today, 2nd Chronicles 20, gives us an account, a historical account that I think we can dive into and learn some very, very important things. So if you want to turn to 2nd Chronicles 20, it's going to be on the screen. We're going to do that. 2nd Chronicles chapter 20, we're going to start with verse 1. After this, the Moabites and the Ammonites and some of the Meunites came to make war on Jehoshaphat. Now that's a tongue tire right there in itself. All of these different people, these nationalities, and then a king who is named Jehoshaphat. It says after this. Well, there's always an after this when you're reading a historical account, because it's going through and telling something happened and it tells something else and moved on. So there's always an after this. But in this case, the after this is Jehoshaphat has done a wonderful thing. He has gone in and set up a new or improved judicial system. He's appointed judges and told them, I want you to judge the people fairly and follow the ways of God and take care of this. Apparently, what was happening was they had gotten away from justice as a nation, and the people were not being treated fairly. And he goes in and says, we're going back to justice and doing things fairly and following God's ways. Go back to the way things were. That's a novel idea, isn't it? To look and see what used to work, and you see things are now in chaos, and said, well, let's go back to what used to work. Boy, can you think of any nation that you wish would do that? But that's exactly what he is set up to do here. Verse 2 says, some men came and told Jehoshaphat, a vast army is coming against you from Edom, from the other side of the sea. It is already in Hazazon Tamar, or that is En Gedi. And you've probably heard that mentioned in history even today, En Gedi. They come to the king and say, there is a vast army that has gotten together, and they're going to come and attack us, attack Judah. And it says they have massed together to do this. And when it says a vast army, it's talking about this is a huge army. This is beyond somebody we can fight. It says vast. It covers the whole area. Verse 3 says this, alarmed, Jehoshaphat resolved to inquire of the Lord, and he proclaimed a fast for all Judah. The people of Judah came together to seek help from the Lord. Indeed, they came from every town in Judah to seek him. Now that word alarmed there, in some translations or some of the versions, maybe a Bible version you're reading from, it may even say afraid or scared or overcome with fear. He was afraid. When they heard and got the reports of the size of this army that was coming to attack them, it scared them. From the top to the bottom, it scared them so much. And they realized that we have no chance. We have no chance to fight against an army this big. They realized it was too big. You know, what do you do when you realize the battle is too big for you? I read the story that took place many years ago about a small store owner and a big store, a corporation was coming and buying up all of the little businesses on that block, and they wanted to build a huge department store. But he held out. He would not back down. He wouldn't sell his little business that had been his family forever. And so finally they gave up on trying to buy the building from him. And so they just built this huge building on each side of him. It just dwarfed his little shop, built it. And then they hung a big banner across. They were actually hung over his building from one to the other. It said, "Grand Opening." And what are you going to do? So he came up with the idea. He had a smaller banner made, and it put it right over his shop, and it just said, "Main Entrance." And sometimes when the battle's too big for you, you got to look somewhere else. You got to look for some other way to fight the battle. You got to go to somewhere else. But where do you go? Where do you go for that help, for that deliverance? Jehoshaphat knew where to go. He turned to God. He said he was resolved to seek the Lord, to turn to him. And he involves the whole nation. He said he called for a fast over the whole land, and everybody was to enter into this time of approaching God. And said people came from everywhere to be there in Jerusalem to be a part of this calling out to God. And what's interesting is that the nation followed him and what he decided to do. And it was happening at a unique time in Judah's history. Because if we read the context here, they're actually going through a bit of a spiritual revival or spiritual renewal. And I just told you about they were setting up the justice system where they're going to seek God to be fair to the people and all these things. And so, you could question and say, God, things are going so good. Why would you allow us to be attacked like this? Why would you bring this at a time like this? Why me, Lord? Why us now? But look at what the king does. 2 Chronicles chapter 20 with verse 5 through 7, it says this. Then Jehoshaphat stood up in the assembly of Judah and Jerusalem at the temple of the Lord in the front of the new courtyard and said, O Lord, God of our fathers, are you not the God who is in heaven? You rule over all the kingdoms of the nations. Power and might are in your hand, and no one can withstand you. O our God, did you not drive out the inhabitants of this land before your people Israel and give it forever to the descendants of Abraham, your friend? There's something to notice about the way he begins this approach to God. Reminds me so much the way Jesus taught his disciples to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. The first thing you do is come to God recognizing who you're coming to. You don't just go right in and asking and desire, what you need. You notice that the king took the time to remind. I don't think he's reminding God. He's not trying to hold God hostage, but he's reminding himself. He's reminding the nation, this is who we're praying to. The God that is so powerful that no vast army is too big for. This is the God who put us in this land and promised that he would always be here for us and it would be with the descendants of Abraham forever. And he's remembering and reminding himself. You know, sometimes when we get into prayer, see if you're like me, when you're really worried about something, anxious about what something's coming, and you say, I got to pray. If you start your prayer this way, a lot of times it's settled before you even get to asking. Because you have reminded yourself, I'm praying to the God of all the heavens. I'm praying to the God, before I even ask for this little small thing, this little blip in history, I'm talking to the God who controls all things. And I'd just forgotten how powerful he was. So begin our prayers and approaching him by just recognizing and voicing how wonderful and powerful God is. Keep going. Skip down to verse 12. See what happens here. He keeps going. He says, O our God, will you not judge them? And look at this. For we have no power to face this vast army that is attacking us. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are upon you. I mean, I just love that. Coming before God and saying, I can't do this. I can't do it, God, but I'm going to come to you. I'm going to trust you. He goes on in verse 13. It says, all the men of Judah with their wives and children and little ones stood there before the Lord. That is a powerful picture. That families and fathers and mothers took the time to travel from outside of Jerusalem and said, our nation is facing a crisis. And they all came together, and they didn't say, children, stay home. We got to go do something. They took them. And can you just picture this? That whole family standing there, holding the hands, and I'm sure there's some that's holding their children in their arms, and they're praying to God. We've experienced that as a nation several times. The Cuban Missile Crisis back in the 60s. I remember reading and seeing the photos when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, how people came together and just prayed for a nation. We saw it at 9/11. We've seen times like that where people come together for a common cause and pray. But it's such a powerful, powerful picture here that it does not need to not be noticed by us. Who do we go to? Who do we go to when we know that it's past our power and past our control? I was reminded of this, and I've used the illustration somewhat in the past. About probably a good 25 years ago, we made a decision to build our playground out here. So instead of paying someone to put it all together, we just hired the supervisor to come in and tell us how to do it. And we had so many people here that were so good at working with their hands and doing things. And some of you are smiling because you remember that day that we got together and we built. Well, one of the things that's so funny to me about that day is I'm standing out there and I'm telling you, I may be from the country, but I'm not a country boy. I don't know how to do anything. But every time, Linda Harrison always still laughs about this. Every time we turn around, this supervisor was handing me a set of plans, and he'd say, now I want you to go over and take these parts C through 12 and put these together. And I'm like, what are you giving it to me for? I'm going to be one of those guys that's trying to run the big drill, and it'll be flipping me around, And he would hand the stuff to me, and I'd go find somebody else and say, do you do this? I'll help you. I'll dig the hole. You just tell me where to dig. And I'd turn around. He's handing me something else. Take this group and go over here and down this. What is up with this? That he thinks I'm this very talented physical work labor guy, and I don't know nothing. I do remember going at the hospital. This has happened a couple of times. Be visiting at the hospital, and I'd be walking the room. The nurses, checking IVs and stuff, and she'd turn around and she goes, do you need to see the chart? I said, no, I don't need to see the chart. And she would say, she said, well, you're a doctor, aren't you? And I said, no, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. You have to be a little old school to remember the Holiday Inn Express thing. But yeah, they don't find it humorous, but I always liked it. But I'm not the guy. I'm not the one that you need to come to in times like that. But Jehoshaphat knew who to turn to. He wasn't the very best king that Judah had ever had. He wasn't the best man that ever been. But he did a lot of right things too. And one of those things was to seek the Lord. Now, if we go on and we keep reading here, you see something happens. As these families are joined together, praying and reaching out to God, praying for an answer, for deliverance, the Spirit of God, it says, comes on a man named Jehaziel, who is a Levite, and he speaks a message from God. And this is down in start with verse 15. It says this. Listen, King Jehoshaphat, and all who live in Judah and Jerusalem. This is what the Lord says to you. Do not be afraid or discouraged because of this vast army. Here it is. For the battle is not yours, but God's. Tomorrow, march down against them. They will be climbing up the pass of Ziz, and you will find them at the end of the gorge in the desert of Zeril. I mean, that's a specific message from God. This is where they're going to be. Verse 17, you will not have to fight this battle. Take your positions, stand firm, and see the deliverance the Lord will give you, O Judah and Jerusalem. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Get out to face them tomorrow, and the Lord will be with you. Now, this is where I've been working to get to this morning, to this point right here. The battle is the Lord's, but we still have to show up. The battle is the Lord's, but we still have to show up. There's a time when we just got to roll up our sleeves and just keep working. Just keep showing up. God's word comforted Jehoshaphat. It brought a peace over all the people. It calmed their fears. It gave them a confidence. And I know that because what it says here, look at verse 18. Jehoshaphat bowed with his face to the ground, and the people of Judah and Jerusalem fell down and worshiped before the Lord. They went from crying out to God because of a great fear and uncertainty, doom that hung over them, that they bowed down and worshiped God. Bowed down and worshiped. Now, if I kept on reading here, it says that some even stood up after they had bowed and worshiped. Some stood up and praised out loud. And that's kind of a good picture of the church, isn't it? Some of us are raised, if you're happy to know it, sit real still. And there's others, we're going to raise their hands. They're going to say amen. And that's kind of, they had some of those people there too. But the point is they praised God. In this moment of just total fear, they praised God. Now, if you go on and read, and we don't have the time to do that here, if you keep reading, it tells what happened. They go out, they take the positions, it even says they were singing and praising when they went out and took the positions for battle. But it says God caused the confusion. He said he put an ambush before the enemy. And I find this very interesting, that this was an army that was made up of different armies. And God, in some way, in his wisdom, caused a distrust in them, and they began to turn on each other in the battle. And they actually killed each other without Judah having to do anything. It says all that the soldiers had to do, and it said it took 3 days to do it, was to pick up the plunder that was left behind. And I just came to me as well. It says, so they got paid for showing up to work. And God gives us that. Just keep showing up. God is going to show up in your life. But we got to show up. And all the struggles you're having, all the uncertainties and fears, and what's going to happen now, and all the things, God's going to show up. We need to show up too. This was several weeks back now. I just went through a period of about 4 or 5 nights where I just didn't sleep. I mean, I was getting just a couple of hours of sleep a night. And thinking, what is it? I can't sleep. And to be honest with you, now that I got over that and I'm back to a normal sleep routine, I know what it is now. I had things on my mind that's coming in the future, and I forgot to trust God. So every time I laid down, even though I wasn't physical, just thinking about this all the time, when I laid down, that's what came to my mind. I started thinking those things. And I just forgot to trust God. And just say, God, I don't know what's going to be down that road there, but you've taken care of me this far. Those things you're going to take care of me there too. So I'm going to go to sleep. And that's just the way it works. Don't forget to trust God. He calls on us to show up, but he's going to show up too. Keep working. Keep being faithful. Keep trusting. Keep believing. That's our job. Let God fight the battles. Let's just keep showing up. It's just his way of doing things. And if you look back through his history, that's how God does things. He knew how he was going to lead the people out of Egypt before he had Moses to pick up a staff and go stand before Pharaoh. He knew he was going to do it. He knew how he was going to do it, but he waited to Pharaoh to go deliver those messages. He knew he was going to part the Red Sea and the people were going to walk through before Moses stood at the banks and raised his arm and his staff and the waters parted. There was no magic in the staff in Moses. It was all God, but God waited for him to do that. Jesus knew that he was going to feed the 5,000, but he waited until the little boy shared his lunch. And he waited until the disciples divided that little lunch up and put it into baskets and they blessed it. Then he performed the miracle. It's all God. But a lot of times he's waiting on us to show up and do what we need to do. I think showing up applies to every area of our life. It applies to our jobs, our secular jobs. Your job is an avenue to see God work. It is an avenue for God to work in your life. It is a way when you show up to raise your families and provide for them. It's a way to provide for those for whatever reason in our lives, and it could be me, it could be you tomorrow. There's some reason we can't work right now because of health or whatever, that we can provide for those people as well. Showing up applies to community. God didn't put any of us here to be a critic. I need to say that again. Our job is not to be a critic and criticize everything that goes on everywhere. God put us to be when I think about community, he put us to be a part of this community. Beth and Brent were just slipped me a message before we started here. If you don't like some of the things that's going on in the community, one of the things you can do this Saturday up at in the Piggly Wiggly parking lot, they're having a bed built there for sleep in heavenly peace. Beth, what time was that? 9 to 12. You can sign up online if you want to come work on that. You know, we can curse the darkness or we can light a candle. Let's light a candle to help some of these kids out. So that's something we can do. Be involved. Support those who do work in our community. If you don't like the way things are going politically, and this is not a punt for a cue for any political party, if we don't like the way things are being handled, stay involved, vote for some different people. And get those people out and get some in. And that's all the way from every level, from the very top all the way to the bottom. But show up, keep showing up. It's not just in our community, it shows up, applies to our church work. It applies to what's going on here. I love pulling up here on a Saturday afternoon, come out just to make sure I've got my stuff ready for today, or just come out to do something, and either seeing it take place or seeing it already taken place, that somebody's mowed the grass, that the communion is put out. And I know from a text message or something through the week that somebody's getting the donuts. Somebody's buying the juice and the coffee. I love the idea that I know that somebody's going to be greeting back here. I love the idea that when I know when Sunday morning comes around, now we all forget sometimes and don't read your newsletter. Read the newsletter. But overall, that I can walk in and just know somebody's in the nursery. Somebody's teaching the class. Somebody's taking care of this. The people showed up. That is a blessing, that we continue to do those things. That when there's a funeral, I know there's going to be a group who says we'll provide a meal for that family going through this tough time. That on Wednesday nights, there's going to be, and that's starting back this coming Wednesday night, there's going to be a meal before our Bible studies. I just love that stuff. I love that the ministry teams are working on things right now for something that's going to happen a couple of months from now. And I know they're working on it. That just makes me smile to know those things. I recently read, somebody said that in your church is either made up either of consumers or contributors. And they either look at church as something that I can get everything I can out of, or it's a place where I can go and serve God. And that's up to you to decide where you fall in that. I think showing up applies to our spiritual life. And you may be struggling in an area of your life and you can't see God working, or something's not working, or you're not getting out of it what you thought you should. But don't get out of the Word. Don't give up on praying. Don't give up on the family. Keep coming together and being with people. Don't stop forgiving people. Don't stop trying to find the good in people. I'm so glad people show up. You know that we support Carolina Pregnancy Center in Washington, and where they reach out and help young ladies that may be considering abortion. And they come in and they help them to make those decisions and show them a sonogram. And then if they decide to keep the child, they partner with them the rest of the way. It's not just try to talk you out of having an abortion, but they say, we'll partner with you all the way and provide these services to you. That's why in the breezeway back here, there's a pile of stuff like diapers and things like that. I noticed there's one more thing left on the tree back here. I looked at it before I walked up here. So if you want to help in that, you can stop by and take that off the tree. But if you're a supporter, you get an email from them, and it'll say something along the lines, it's called a diamond alert, and it'll say, hey, we just had a lady come in, and she's considering aborting this baby. Pray. Pray. And 11 times this year, gotten an email saying they chose life. Let that sink in a second. Little place down here that we have the benefit of supporting, that there's 11 children that have come into this world and have a chance. And mothers, they're going to have people there to support them, to help them through that time. Praise God, somebody showed up. Keep showing up. Galatians 6:9 says, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. If it matters, we'll show up, and we'll keep showing up. The temperature that day was more than 100 degrees when Floyd walked out of the Gospel Rescue Mission in Tucson, Arizona. Lying ahead of Floyd was a 10-mile walk to his destination. And many people often said, Floyd, let me give you a ride. Let me give you a ride. He said, no, not today. Maybe another day, but not today. And when he tried to explain, he told the preacher, Roger, at the Pantano Christian Church outside of Tucson, he said, for you see, he was on his way to that church because that was the day he was going to be baptized. He said, I wanted to walk because I wanted God to know that this mattered to me. If it matters to us, we'll keep showing up. We'll keep showing up for doing the things to bring the good. And I know whether it's your job, your secular job, whether it's in retirement, whether it's in a position right now where you don't know where things are going to be on the work front, whether it's your spiritual life, your church life, your community. If it matters, you'll keep showing up.